It turned out that in this world of immortals I received a package, and inside it was a direct connection to a mini-world. The villagers there had been starving for 3 years. The situation was so dire that they had resorted to eating dirt. I immediately took out my sweet puff pastry, cut it into pieces, and dropped it on them. A hungry villager was astonished. He picked up the large soft pieces lying on the ground and took a big bite. The taste was so wonderful, they tasted sweet and crispy. It truly felt like a blessing had been showered upon them from the heavens. Young Yunanchin Yao didn't waste a moment, grabbing as much food as she could and running straight home. Ma'am Siam. Her younger sister, who was extremely emotional, was about to hang herself, considering herself a burden. Yunanchin Yao entered the hut just in time and prevented the tragedy. She saved her younger sister from the noose. With a big smile, she looked at little Yunanchin Huan and shouted, "The heavens have sent them food. Look, dude. Now they won't have to starve." In her panic and haste, the elder sister miscalculated her strength, sending poor Jin Huan crashing to the ground. The younger sister stared at the object in her sister's hand and was stunned to see the actual food. Yes, it was indeed food, but where did it come from? Yunanchin Yao pointed outside with a mysterious expression. The younger sister immediately jumped up and ran outside to look. As soon as she saw the rain of food falling from the sky, she pinched herself hard. The pain she felt immediately told her that this wasn't a dream, it was all happening for real. Jin Huan was staring at the sky in amazement when suddenly she saw something very strange among the clouds, a man's enormous hands. In reality, all that precious food was falling from those very hands. The girl screamed loudly and called out to her sister, "Look at that mysterious monster in the sky." Was it a god? But Qingye was so busy that she didn't notice and handed the basket to her younger sister. "What nonsense are you talking about? Which hands? Hurry up and gather everything, otherwise the neighbors will take it all." Jin Wan could clearly see those huge hands in the sky, so she pointed her finger again, insisting. She looked up. Had her sister gone blind? But Jin Yao could only see white clouds and nothing else. Worried, she touched her younger sister's forehead and, in a troubled voice, thought that perhaps the child was being carried away by joy. To calm her down, she promised to give her full share and, without thinking, put a piece of sweet pastry in her mouth. Little Qin Wan immediately forgot all her questions and was lost in the taste of that divine dessert. It was sweet and perfectly baked, like a delicacy from another world. Seeing her so happy, the older sister breathed a sigh of relief and immediately ran out of the house. She joined the villagers in collecting rations, fearing a moment's delay would bring lifelong regret. The rest of the villagers also realized that simply filling their stomachs wasn't enough. So everyone brought their empty sacks and bags, collected food, and began taking it home. After all, saving for later was better than just one meal. Fortunately, so much food was falling from the sky that no one had to fight with anyone. Just then, some children playing nearby looked up at the sky in amazement. They wondered whose big hands were moving in the sky. The sight was strange and unbelievable, but their parents were so busy that they immediately grabbed their hands and scolded them. They told them to stop talking nonsense and help quickly. No one in the village paid any attention to the children. They thought they were just making up stories to avoid work. So, afraid of their parents scolding, the children had no choice but to remain silent. They too began carrying food home in baskets. In no time, the entire village was busy. Everyone was wondering how to preserve such a bounty of food. Now there was neither grief nor pain on their faces. Seeing all this from afar, I was in awe. How much a single biscuit had changed their lives. The crumbs, which were nothing to me, had become their rations for days. The small villagers took out only what they needed to satisfy their hunger at that moment and immediately stored the rest in their underground storehouses. Some even made soup from the pastry crumbs to make it last longer. Yo. Seeing all this, my heart was filled with sorrow. I realized how hard these little people were living. I looked at the 4 sweet pastries left on my plate and thought, the sweets I had never even touched before were a matter of life and death for them. At first I felt like breaking up the entire remaining pastry and throwing it all over them. But when I saw them lighting a fire and preparing to cook, I thought it would be better to save it for later. After all, the future is long and there will be more opportunities to make these little people of mine happy. First, I need to make their living a little better. They hadn't seen a drop of rain in who knows how many years. The fields were completely dry and the ground was as hard as stone. The problem was I didn't have any water to use immediately. After thinking for a while, I decided to hide the magic box the system had given me somewhere safe, but there were a lot of people coming and going here, and if someone saw the box, it could cause serious trouble. In reality, I had been reborn into this world of cultivators, but in the form of the story's most ruthless villain. The system had promised me that if I tortured the heroes enough to drive them down the dark path, I would be rewarded so greatly that I could immediately return to my original world. But as soon as I heard this, I lay comfortably on the bed and forgot about the mission. In my previous life, I was an orphan, working from before sunrise until late at night. Compared to that, life here was like heaven. Being a leader was 10,000 times better than being here. I wasn't crazy to go back and suffer again. Seeing my laziness, the system was furious, but it couldn't force me. In the end, it had no choice but to give me this microword. But before leaving, it issued one final warning. If I didn't take proper care of these little people, I would face the most terrible punishment in all of existence. I was forced to accept this deal. Anyway, I was now the leader of the great Unio sect, and managing such a small village was no big deal for me. I picked up the box and returned to my spacious leader's quarters. As I walked, I kept peeking inside the box and noticed that even though I was treading on rocks and uneven roads, the little people inside seemed completely unperturbed by the commotion outside. I placed the box in a safe place and left the room. Then I remembered the powers of the previous master. I activated my cultivation power and, in the blink of an eye, flew toward Yuanpei. This was the largest mountain in our entire sect and the very place where my 4 young disciples lived. Yes, the same 4 boys whom the system wanted me to ruthlessly torture. According to the system, if they had endured the worst pain inflicted by this ruthless villain, a power would have awakened within them that would have made them living legends. They were destined to become the greatest leaders in the world. But I had no interest in beating people. I headed straight for Qin Yanpei's kitchen. At that moment, my 4th disciple, young Ren Qingshu, was coming with a tray of food in her hand and collided directly with me. It was a good thing my reflexes were fast enough, otherwise the entire tray would have fallen. Still, a little soup splashed onto my silk rope, staining its edge, nigh and wet. Poor Ren Qingshu trembled like jelly at the sight. She immediately fell to her knees and began begging for forgiveness, terrified. Crying, she repeatedly said it was an accident and begged me not to kill her. Seeing her in this state made me feel terrible. A girl who should have been happy and playful at her age was trembling on the ground, begging for mercy after she'd spilled a little soup. I shook my head, took a deep breath, and thought about how depraved the previous villain must have been to frighten such an innocent girl so much. I extended my hand to her, helped her up, and told her everything was fine. I told her not to be so afraid of me again. But Ran Qingshu became even more frightened after hearing my words. The poor girl trembled even more. It was clear from a distance that she didn't believe a single word I said. Finally, I decided it wouldn't be right to force her to wake up and left her there. It was clear that this real villain had a very bad reputation among his disciples. Who knows what atrocities he might have committed against them in the past. Then I looked at the food on the tray and was truly amazed. 4 different dishes and a large bowl of soup all looked amazing. The aroma was wonderful and it contained both meat and vegetables. The entire meal seemed perfectly balanced. My curiosity piqued and I asked the girl who such a large feast was prepared for. Timmering in fear, she replied that it was all for her humble master, meaning me. She also shyly added that the food was a little simple and she hoped I would like it. Hearing this, my eye twitched. If this was simple, what would luxury food be like? I couldn't even imagine the luxury of the previous owner's life. I forced a small laugh and said I was just joking. But when I saw Ren Qingshu looking at me strangely, I quickly changed the topic. I said, this food is too much anyway, and I won't be able to eat it all. I've just built a new enclosure for some small spiders. So help me out and cut these 2 dishes into small pieces so I can feed my new and slightly strange pets. I pointed to the chicken and sweet and sour porridge on the tray. Poor Ren Qingshu didn't understand a word of what I was saying. But in fear, she immediately started cutting both dishes into small pieces. She felt like I might get angry and kill her if she didn't listen to me. While she was working, I took out a jet telescope from my rope. It was actually a magical storage item with almost infinite space inside. However, I had very little cultivation resources inside, and my deceptive system was responsible for all of this. It had given me the villain's full memories but had erased all the maps of the legendary dragons hidden in the novel. Because of this, I was almost in the dark. For now, I only knew my identity and basic information about the set. I knew nothing about the rest. It was a good thing that my disciples had very distinct and recognizable personalities. Otherwise, I might have confused them and disgraced myself in front of everyone. In any case, such storage earrings and space artifacts were quite common in this immortal world. The most remarkable thing was that they kept the food fresh forever. No matter how long I took it out, it always came out hot, fresh, and smoking. I waved my hand, and in an instant I took the water from the large container into my storage. Then my eyes fell on the fresh vegetables neatly arranged there. I asked Ren Qingshu to chop these vegetables into small pieces as this was going to be the first proper meal for the people of the microcosmos. I didn't want to be so stingy with them. I wondered what other good thing could be sent to those little people. I carefully scanned the entire kitchen, and then my eyes fell on a large wooden tub filled with fresh fish. The fish were jumping happily. Seeing this, an idea flashed through my mind, and I licked my fingers in excitement. I thought, these poor people have been struggling with hunger for so many years. Surely their bodies must be very weak and their immunity must be low. I'll make them a nice steamed fish packed with protein. Excitedly, I rolled up my sleeves, walked over to the chopping table, and picked up a large knife. But as soon as my disciple saw me holding the knife, her face went pale. She thought this was some strange new punishment. I was about to intimidate her. She immediately fell to the ground, crying and begging for mercy. He said that if anyone saw the great guru cooking, everyone would think she was worthless and she would suffer terribly. Seeing her condition, I immediately put down the knife and calmly said, "Okay, I won't cook anything." I asked her to get up, explaining that there was no need to fall to my knees over every little thing. Cooking was no big deal for me. But seeing the girl's fear, I decided I shouldn't overdo this villainous character for now. Ow. Otherwise people would get suspicious. Bran Qingshu immediately picked up the knife and began cleaning the fish in my place. But it was clear on her face that she was very confused. She was mumbling to herself, and she felt that her master's behavior had become very strange. She thought to herself that perhaps this was another trick of his tormenting her. This thought frightened her even more, and she decided to talk to her older sister about it tonight so everyone could be alert. After a while, she had arranged all the food beautifully in separate dishes. Honestly, girls' attention to detail is amazing. If I were there, I would never have thought of such neatness and planning. I was delighted with the result, and before leaving, I added some fruit and some milk to the rest of the food. But when I returned to my room, I saw that the box containing microcosmos had almost doubled in size. A sheet of paper suddenly appeared beneath it, detailing the rules for feeding the village. I picked it up and began reading. It stated that because the villagers had been facing drought and starvation for 3 years, their bodies had become very weak. For the first time, they should be given only light and easily digestible food. Excessive oil, spices, or heavy foods were prohibited. Reading this, I hit my forehead. How could I have forgotten such an important information? It was a good thing the system had reminded me in time. I immediately decided to cancel the fish and heavy food plans for now. Then I turned the paper over and saw a map of the entire microcosmos on the back. It also featured a level system. Every 500 kilograms of food donated unlocked a new area of the map. We were currently on levels 1 through 6. Just then, a notification from the system rang in my head. It informed me that due to Microcosmos level rules, my room was now directly connected to that box. No matter how big the box became, the space inside my room would expand accordingly. If necessary, it could even accommodate an entire village. But from the outside, my room would look completely normal. Hearing this, I raised my eyebrows in surprise. For the first time, I felt that the system had a little heart. I was already worried about how I would hide such a large object once the box leveled up. Now that tension was over, I immediately got to work and took out an empty bowl from my magical storage. I waved my hand, and in the blink of an eye, the bowl was filled with clear, sparkling water. The ground inside the box had cracked badly due to the heat and drought. I picked up a large spoonful of water and began sprinkling it on the rice fields that were the villagers' livelihood. The spoon was so full that the water spilled over the edge and dripped onto other areas. At that very moment, villagers were heading out to the fields with their buckets, but sadness was evident on every face. The drought of the past 3 years had taken so much from them. Many people died of hunger, and many fell prey to the wild animals while searching for food. Yet, no one abandoned their rice fields, as they were their last hope. Young Kenya was about to pick up her heavy bucket when her younger sister, Qingquan, quickly snatched it from her hand. She reminded her that her elder sister had been weak and sickly since childhood, so she should be allowed to do the work. Then, proudly, she declared that she was no delicate princess and had immense strength. Saying this, she lifted the nearly 3-kilogram bucket with ease, as if it weighed nothing. Just then, a drop of water landed directly on her hand. The water was so cool and fresh that her face lit up with joy. She immediately dropped the bucket and, looking up at the sky, shouted with all her might, "It's raining!" Her sudden scream startled me, and the spoon in my hand shook. A multitude of drops fell down at once. The next moment, the entire village looked up at the sky, and cries of surprise echoed everywhere. No one could understand what was happening. Yu Qinyao also felt drops falling on her clothes, and when she looked up, she gasped. This wasn't ordinary rain. It seemed as if entire streams of water were pouring down from the sky. Strangest thing was that the water was falling directly onto the rice fields. Not a single drop was wasted. Within moments, all the fields in the village were completely drenched and ready for cultivation. Saying this, little Qingquan's mouth fell open. This didn't seem like ordinary. Had some god finally shown them mercy? All the villagers were stunned. Then suddenly there was a roar of joy. People fell to their knees and, looking up at the sky, began to thank the immortal gods. Just then, a girl's astonished voice was heard from the crowd. "Look up! The god has a huge spoon in his hand. He is the one giving us this precious water." Hearing her words, everyone's eyes fell on Wenling Shu. Although her family was ruined and no longer wealthy, she was still highly educated and knowledgeable about the world. Because of this, despite her young age, the villagers respected her greatly. A woman in the crowd looked at her with concern and said, "Daughter, why are you saying such strange thing, such strange thing? I can't see anything up there." When Ling Shu knew no one would believe her, so she chose to remain silent. No matter how much she explained, people would think she was crazy. She continued to gaze at the sky, and she could clearly see my face among the clouds. I felt her intense gaze. Among so many sunburned villagers, her fair and soft skin made her stand out. She looked just like a freshly steamed bun. Then I slapped my forehead. I remembered it was almost dinner time and I hadn't even spoken to the villagers properly yet. When I learned that when Nixu could see me clearly, I thought it would be best to use her to organize the villagers. This would make everything go much faster. I bent down, looked her in the eye, and asked directly, "What is your name?" When Nixu hadn't expected that giant man to speak to her. Terrified, she immediately fell to her knees. But she quickly answered me, "Lord, my name is Wen Lingchu Madaku. I will do whatever you say." Meanwhile, the children excitedly shouted to their mothers, look, there's a very handsome boy talking to us up above. But the adults didn't believe the children at all. Yet they spoke with such confidence that some people were a little suspicious. But no matter how many times they looked up at the sky, they couldn't see anything. Then I realized that in this microcosm, apart from the little children, only Wen Lingshu and little Qinjuan my face. When the parents heard their children repeatedly talking about joints and the man in the sky, they genuinely began to wonder if they had gone mad. Everyone looked quite worried. Seeing everyone so confused, I stopped joking and spoke directly to my two intermediaries. "You two can see me, so quickly tell all the villagers to put all their clean utensils, pots, and buckets outside in the courtyard, Amiad. I'm going to send them good food so everyone can regain their strength." I didn't care whether the villagers believed me or not. As soon as the hot food was served, all their doubts would vanish. Valingshi and Qinjua nodded without a moment's delay. But before leaving, Valingshi politely asked, "Great God, what name should we call you?" Seeing that both girls were around my age in the real world, I didn't feel the need to be overly formal. I said, "My name is Shu Jinhan, and don't call me God or God anymore." With that, I didn't even wait for her reaction and lay down on my comfortable leader's bed. I also started reading the village care manual again. To be honest, I never imagined caring for the little ones would be so difficult, but the relief I felt seeing their lives improve was incredible. I took out the finely chopped fish meat that Ran Chengshu had prepared for me from my storage and stared at the scene inside the box. Welling immediately stood up and shouted loudly, "Everyone go home right now. Bring all the empty pots, jars, and buckets to the middle of the courtyard. The Lord of Heaven is about to send us a grand feast." Upon hearing her words, many people thought the poor woman had lost her mind. Only a few, who knew her wisdom and honesty well, believed her and immediately ran to get their utensils. But most people disbelieved her words and continued to tend to their farms. Yes, some curious people did come up to her and ask, "Tell me the truth, is a god really going to give us food?" Me. By then, the Youngshin had lost her patience. Tu said angrily, "If you guys have so much doubt, then don't believe it. But when everyone else gets the food provided by the god and you don't, then don't cry like a deer." Hearing this, the crowd erupted in commotion. Many of the elders didn't like the idea of a little girl scolding them, but there were some sensible people in the village. Without arguing, they immediately ran back to their homes and began carrying large pots and buckets. As more people listened to Wellingshi, the crowd around her grew smaller. Then Yang Jinyu also remained silent. She stepped forward and said, "Wellingshi is my younger sister's teacher. I believe everything she says, and what's the harm in putting the dishes out anyway? If you don't believe it, then just stand here and starve." Hearing this, people looked at each other. Finally, their minds lit up. Someone said, "She's absolutely right. Why are we wasting time arguing here? Look, half the steaks have already been taken home." And then what happened? Everyone panicked and ran back to their homes. Within 3 minutes, the largest pots, buckets, and utensils were set up in almost every courtyard. Everyone waited for the food and water to fall from the sky, and Yang Qinyao was still looking up at the sky. Confusion was evident on her face. While she had supported Wing Likashii, she still couldn't quite figure out what she was believing. Metokaim. Yang Qinyao hadn't supported Wing because she had complete faith in the miracle. In fact, she did so because her younger sister Qinjun had told her the same thing. Initially, she had thought the girl was hallucinating due to hunger and weakness, but now, after thinking carefully, she began to think that perhaps both Qinjun and Wenlingji were truly seeing the same giant man. The elder sister grabbed Qinjun's hand and tried to pull her inside the house. But Qinjuan quickly freed her hand and said, "Don't stop me. God himself has given me this job." In fact, Qin Yuan had been training in martial arts since childhood. He was extremely fast, agile, and possessed extraordinary strength from birth. Hardly anyone in the entire village could match her. When Yunnan Qinyao saw that her stubborn sister wouldn't change her mind when she thought it pointless to argue further and went inside alone. Meanwhile, Qin Xuan went from door to door, banging on doors and shouting that the heavenly god would soon send food. But initially, she received only taunts and abuse. A bitter and angry woman came out and shouted, "Jingjuan, I didn't know you were such a hungry thief. If you're here to steal my stored provisions, stop dreaming. You can't even step inside." Jingjuan tried to reason calmly, but the woman refused to listen. Finally, fed up, Jingjuan lost his patience and smashed the large door of the woman's house with a single kick. The woman, stunned by his immense strength, turned to stone. Jingjuan hadn't intended to harm her. He simply wanted her to put her empty pot outside, so he ignored him. The frightened woman quietly dragged her large pot into the courtyard. As soon as the task was completed, Jingjuan left for the next house without a word. When the other neighbors heard the door break, they panicked. No one wanted their house to be kicked down, so they started opening their doors themselves. Just then, an elderly grandmother came out with a wooden stick and shouted, "You rude girl, if you want my food, you'll have to get past this old man first." But Jingjuan was used to such people. She easily dodged the blow of the stick and quickly lifted the old woman's large barrel and placed it in the middle of the courtyard. Then, without a backward glance, she left. Grandma stood there in shock, unable to comprehend what had just happened. Meanwhile, Wen Lingxi was busy finishing my sentence. After much hustle and bustle, almost the entire village stood in the courtyard with their empty pots and pots. Of course, some who had been coerced were still joking, waiting for the two girls to be proven wrong. Wait in Kasurza, they were convinced that no food would come from the sky. I was watching from above. When I saw that everything was ready, I picked up my large spoon, filled with finely chopped steamed fish. I dropped the first portion into Qinxuan's barrel. Both Qinxuan and her older sister immediately fell to their knees and bowed in gratitude. Then I quickly began distributing the fish from one house to another. At this sight, the laughter vanished from the faces of those who had been joking. Even those who had been suspicious trembled with fear and surprise, wondering if they had angered the gods. What? In fact, the villagers couldn't even see my face or my entire body. All they could see was a giant spoon, about 50 meters long, in the sky, dropping hot food into the pots of every household. Screams echoed from everywhere. This is truly a miracle of the god. The gods have shown mercy on us. We are finally saved. In a short while, the entire village looked up at the sky and offered thanks. The pots in every courtyard were filled to the brim with that fragrant, hot, and delicious fish. No one was left empty-handed. The villagers couldn't stop salivating at the sight of that amazing food. One of them folded his hands, looked up at the sky, and politely asked, "Great master, when will we be allowed to start eating?" I simply waved my hand, signaling everyone to start eating without hesitation. Wen Lingxi immediately conveyed my message. The next moment, the villagers pounced on the food as if there were no tomorrow. Seeing them eating so eagerly, I spoke to my two helpers in a very calm voice. "Kim Jong and Wen Lingxi, these people have been hungry for years. Tell them to eat slowly. There's no need to swallow so quickly. And also tell them that, from today on, I'll send them 3 meals a day. No one will have to go hungry." As soon as Wen Lingxi relayed my message to the villagers, tears welled up in the eyes of many. Everyone fell to their knees again and began to thank me profusely. One man cried, "If it weren't for the kindness of our protector, my entire family would have died of starvation." He was about to bow his head to the ground when I quickly signaled to Kim Jung and told him to stop. I said, "Since I have these powers, this is no big deal. There's no need for so many formalities." But as soon as I finished speaking, Wen Lingxi replied stubbornly, "No, master, how can you say that? You are the one who gave us hope to live again." There was so much confidence in his eyes that I finally had to give in. It was true. After 3 years of hunger and drought, anyone would be grateful to suddenly receive such a great blessing. At my request, the villagers stopped gulping down their food quickly and began to eat each bite with ease. The taste of steamed fish was like a dream for them. From above, I could see everyone's faces. There was only joy everywhere. For these poor people, a full meal was like heaven. Just then, young Kanya came out pushing an old wooden wheelchair. Her elderly grandmother was sitting it. Kim Juan ran to her and offered her a large bowl full of hot fish. "Grandma, you must be very hungry. Take this and eat comfortably. We have plenty more." The old woman, unable to walk, was unaware of anything outside. She took the bowl in surprise and, hearing the aroma, exclaimed loudly, "This is really meat." But the next moment, her face hardened. She picked up her wooden stick and slapped Kim Juan hard on the head. "Where did you get such expensive food? Did you steal it?" Poor Kim Young immediately tried to explain that it was all a gift from the heavenly protector. But the old woman grieved and angry. Stop talking nonsense. There's no God in this world. If there really was a God, he wouldn't have let us suffer for so many years. Hearing this, Kim Young panicked and immediately shut Grandma's mouth. He was afraid that the old woman's words might anger the giant in the sky. Then she looked up at the sky in embarrassment and said, "Sir, please forgive me." Grandma didn't understand what she was saying. But deep inside, Kim Young knew that a truly kind person wouldn't get angry over such things. Whenever she looked at me, she saw not hatred or arrogance, but genuine kindness and sincerity, and that's exactly what happened, and I simply waved my hand and ignored the old woman's words. I also filled everyone's dishes with clean, fresh water and then left the box. That night, the people of Microcosmos had the most relaxing and filling meal of their lives. When everyone had finished eating, the entire village gathered in the square. A new discussion began there. After so many years of starvation and death, the village had no leader left. Now everyone was going to decide who would be entrusted with the responsibility of the village going forward.